It's Sunday morning, May 7th, 2023. Baseball records, runs scored. Last video, I went through numbers 1 through 25 of 169 players I'm covering. 168 are in the Hall of Fame. Pete Rose, the exception. So 169 players I'm ranking. Number 1 was, in the record book, Rickey Henderson, 2,295 runs scored careered. He did it in 3,081 games. But did you know that as far as averaging runs scored per game, who's the best who ever did it? Billy Hamilton. And he was number 25 on my list because he scored 1,679 runs, but he did it in 1,594 games. You know what that averages out to be? 1.06 runs scored per game played. So I did a what if scenario with Billy Hamilton. If he played 3,562 games, why do I use that number? Because that's the most games played by any baseball player in history. Pete Rose, 3,562. Since Billy Hamilton, 1890s, he played. If he played 3,562 games and he's averaging 1.06 runs scored per game played, he would have ended up with 3,274 runs scored, number 1 all time. That would have been the baseball record. But since he didn't play the games, Rickey Henderson is number 1, 2,295 runs scored. Let's continue looking at different players on my list. I'm on number 26 right now, 1 through 169 ranked. 26 is Bid McPhee. He scored 1,678 runs. His high was 139. Not bad, but I'm looking for guys who have a very good run scored per average per game played. Following me? I told you Billy Hamilton averaged 1.06 runs scored per game played. More runs scored per game played. Bid McPhee, 1,678. Where does he rank? Bid McPhee ranks not very high. 27 on the list, Mickey Mantle, 1,676 runs scored, but he did it in 18 years. So he had a good average. Mickey Mantle, 1,676. He played about 2,000 games. So very good average for Mickey Mantle. Dave Winfield, 28, 1,669. He played a long time. His high was 106, so not a good average. Some guys average better than others. 29 on the list, Ken Griffey, 1,662. His high was 125. 30, Joe Morgan, 1,650. His high, 122. 31, Cal Ripken, 1,647. 121 was his average. 32 on the list, Robin Yount, 1,632. 121 was his high. 33, Eddie Murray, 1,627 runs scored. 115 was his high. 34 on the list, Paul Waner. He had a good average, 1,627. He had a high of 142. If you can be in the 130s, 140s, 150s, 160 runs scored per game played, you're doing very good. So Paul Waner, good average. 35, Al Kaline, 1622, 121 runs was his high. 36, Roger Connor, 1620, 133 his high. 38, Chipper Jones, 1619, 123 was his high. 40, Jake Beckley, 1,600 runs scored, 123 was his high. 41 on the list, Ed Delante, 1,599 runs scored, but listen to this, 1,800 games. So he's averaging .871 runs scored per game. The best is 1 run per game played. So Delante's below it, .87. Not quite 1. But he had a high of 149. So he's better than some of these other guys. Following me? 42, George Brett, 1,583. 119 was his high. 40, that was 42. 43, Jim Thome, 1,583 runs scored. 122 was his high. 44 on the list. Here's a good guy. Roger Hornsby. 1,579 runs scored. But listen to this. 1 year he scored 156 runs. What does that tell you? Tells you he gets on base. Let's see, 0.69 runs scored per game. The best is 1. Then you have guys at 0.90, 0.80. Hornsby, I've got him here, just under 70 runs scored per game. But I like that, 156 in 1 year. Very good. These other guys are like 110, 120, 130. 45 on the list, Tim Raines, 1,571 runs scored. This high, 133. That's not bad. How about this guy? 46 on the list, Hugh Duffy, 1,552 runs scored in his career, but he had a high of 161 runs in 1 year. That's more than a run scored per game played in that season. Hugh Duffy, his average 0.89. 1.00 is the record. That's Billy Hamilton. 1.06 to be exact. But Hugh Duffy, 0.89. Give him more games, and he's up in there, 2,600 runs scored. 47, Reggie Jackson, 1,551 runs scored. 123 was his high. 48, Max Carey, 1,545. 140 1 year. 49, George Davis, 1,539. 125 was his high. 50, Frankie Frisch, 1,532. 121 was his high. 51 on the list. Listen to this guy. Dan Brothers. 1,529 runs scored, but he had 153 1 year. And he played back in the 1880s. They're not even playing 150 games. So he has more than a run scored per game. Trying to highlight some of these guys that had excellent season at scoring runs. 153 for Dan Brothers. 52, Jeff Bagwell. Now, Dan Brothers is in the old school, which is, to me, the years up to 1949. From the 1870s and 1949 is old school. Dan Brothers, 153 runs was his high. How about this guy, Jeff Bagwell? He's in the new school era, which is after 1950. Jeff Bagwell scored 1,517 runs. But listen to this. 1 year he had 152. Now, in the new school era, they're playing 162 games. So for 1 year, Jeff Bagwell had an excellent year scoring runs. 152. Almost a run scored per game played. I like it. 53, Sam Rice, 1,514 runs scored. 121 was his high. 54, Wade Boggs, 1,513. 128 was his high. 55, Eddie Matthews, 1,509. 118 runs scored was his high in a season. 56, Roberto Alomar, 1508 runs scored, 138 was his high. How about this guy? 57 on the list, Al Simmons, 1,507 runs scored. But listen, he had 152 one year. Al Simmons, very good average for that season. 58, Mike Schmidt, 1508, 114 was his high. 59, Nap Lajoie, 1,504 runs scored career. 145 was his high. So he was good at runs scored. So I've done 1 through 59 on the ranking of career leaders in runs scored. Nap Lajoie is number 59 on the list. He's the last person in the Hall of Fame, Baseball Hall of Fame, with 1,500 or more runs scored. 1,504. The rest of the guys I'm going to cover now are below 1,500 runs scored. So if you're a major leaguer, what would be your goal? I think your goal would be 300 batting average career, 500 home runs, 1,500 RBIs, right? And how about 1,500 runs scored? Wouldn't that be your goal? Those are nice numbers. Of course, some of the excellent players have the 300, 755 homers, 2,200 RBIs, and 2,000 runs scored. A guy like Henry Aaron. How about Babe Ruth? 700 homers, 342 lifetime, 2,200 RBIs, and 2,000 runs scored. How about him? So some of those guys are in a class by themselves. 60 on the list, Frank Thomas, 1,494. Okay, now the guys are below 1,500. He had a high 115. Goose Goslin, 61 on the list, 1,482. 122 was his high. 62, Harry Hooper, 1,429. 111 was his high. 63, Rod Carew, 1,424. 128 was his high. Here's a guy. Joe Kelly, 1,421 runs scored. But listen to this. 165 runs scored was his high in one season. 165 runs scored. And he only played probably about 120 games because he's in the old school era. 120, 130 games for Joe Kelly, and he's more than a run scored per game played. 65, David Ortiz, 1,419 runs scored. 119 was his high. 66, Roberto Clemente, 1,416. 105 was his high. 67, John Ward, 1,410. 134. He's in the old school era. Was his high. 68, Billy Williams, 1,410. 137 was his high. That's pretty good for Billy Williams because he's in the new school era. 69, Sam Crawford, 1,391 runs scored. 109 was his high. 70 on the list, Joe DiMaggio. Listen to this. 1,390 runs scored, but listen to this. 1 year he had 151 runs scored. 151. He's on base. 71, Tony Gwynn. 1,383. 119 was his high. Boy, you would think with Gwynn getting over 3,100 hits would have scored more runs because he's on all the time. 72, Andrew Dawson, 1,373, 107 was his high. 73 on the list. I want to pause right here. King Kelly. Why? King Kelly is back in the 1880s, 1890s. 1,357 career runs scored. But listen to this. 155 runs scored one season. And according to my calculations, King Kelly, I want to point out something. I told you Billy Hamilton was number 1 in runs scored as far as per average per game. 1.06 for Billy Hamilton. Why? 1,679 runs scored, 1,594 games. That's more than a run scored per game played. You know who's number 2 as far as average of runs scored per game played? King Kelly. 1880s, 1890s. He played 1,456 games and scored 1,357 runs. So he's 100 short of a run per game play, of a run scored per game play. 1,456 to 1,357 is a difference of 101. Almost a run scored per game played. So he's at 0.93 average of runs scored per game play. King Kelly. If he only plays 1,456 games, give him another 1,000, maybe 1,200 games, and he's up in the 2,800s as far as runs scored. King Kelly, number 2 on the list. Some guys are better at scoring runs than other guys. Even though King Kelly's number 73 ranked, his average is better than other players. 74, Larry Walker, 1,355. 143 for Walker. He's new school. 143 runs in 1 year. 75, Ivan Rodriguez, 1,354. His high, 116. 76, Fred McGriff, 1,349. His high was 111. 77, Pee Wee Reese, 1,338 runs scored. 132 was his high. It's not bad, 132. I would think your goal playing in a baseball season is to score 100 runs. Play 162 games, score 100. 78, Luis Aparicio, 1,335. He's the first guy on this list that has less than 100 runs scored for his high. His high was 97. Luis Aparicio. 79, Barry Larkin, 1,329. 117 was his high. 80, Vlad Guerrero, 1,328. His high, 124. 81, Richie Ashburn, 1,322. His high, 111. 82, Luke Appling, 1,319. His high was 111. 83, Ryan Sandberg, 1,318 runs scored. 116 was his high. 84, Ernie Banks, 1,305. His high, 119. 85, Kiki Kyler, 1,305 runs scored. But listen to this, 155 1 year was his high. Kiki Kyler, very good average of runs scored per game that year, 155. 86, Harold Baines, 1,299. 89 runs scored was his high. 87, Harry Heilman, 1,291. 121 was his high. 88, Zach Wheat, 1,289. 125 his high. 89, Henny Manouche, 1,288. 121 was his high. 90 on the list, George Sisler, 1,284. 137 was his high. Let's stop there. 26 through 90 on the list. My point in this video in the baseball records, runs scored. Who was better at scoring runs? Comparing them with other Hall of Famers. Some guys, I mean, are just incredible. What do I mean? At scoring runs. Babe Ruth. Let's see, I've got him here. Let me go through the list here. Let me just point out something here. We know that Rickey Henderson is number 1 in runs scored as far as Hall of Famers. There's 2,295, but it took him 3,000 games. So his average is not that good. He played a lot of games. That's why he scored a lot of runs. Ty Cobb had 148 as his high. That's pretty good. I mean, if you're over, see, in Cobb's era, it was only 154 games scheduled. So he had 148. So he's almost a run scored per game. Very good. Aaron is in the new school. His high was 127. So compare him with Cobb. Cobb's better at scoring runs than Aaron. But how about Babe Ruth? 177 runs scored one year. That's incredible. It was only a 154 game season. 177. He's averaging more than a run scored per game played. You have to get on base. Of course, he had a lot of round trippers. We see some of the other guys are in the 130s, 120s, 110. But other guys excel. Lou Gehrig, 167 was his high. How about Ted Williams? He had 151 year. Jimmy Fox, 151 was his high. Jesse Burkett, 160. Willie Keeler, 165. Billy Hamilton, of course, he holds the record, 198 runs scored in 130 games. That's incredible. See, a lot of the other guys are just 120s, 110, 130. If you're over 130, that's good. Paul Wainer had 142. Ed Delonte had 149, his high. Roger Hornsby, 156. How about that one? Hugh Duffy, 161. Max Carey, 140. Dan Brothers, 153. Al Simmons, 152. Nap Lajoie, 145. Joe Kelly, 165. Joe DiMaggio, 151. King Kelly, 155. The rest of the guys on this list, Kiki Kyler, 155. Very good. The other guys, 110, 100. And then some guys are below 100 as their high. My goal would be 100 if I was playing. All right, that does it for this video. Numbers 26 through 90. We'll keep going in the next video. Thanks for watching. I'm out.